Okay, so we're looking at chapter 19, which is called Linan. So in this chapter, Leah wakes up and is disappointed to learn that Ke is going back to Chengdu. Linan talks to Leah while she feeds the ducks, and they decide to go visit Joan in the hospital. At first, Joan is very suspicious of Linan and actually quite rude. However, after she learns of the death of Linan's husband, they bond and begin to open up to one another. So Joan's original suspicions of Linan are seen in this key quote, "Cold, rigid. Joan was staying behind a brick wall." So this quote uses a metaphor, behind a brick wall, and also truncated sentences, cold, rigid. So those short, sharp sentences are truncated sentences. And that kind of reinforces Joan's attitude as well, where she's being quite blunt and cold towards Linan. But once she begins to warm up to her, we see this through the metaphor. The two women smiled very quietly at each other, and Leah suddenly felt locked out. So Leah is using a metaphor there, locked out. She's not actually locked out of anything, but she's feeling as though, they have a bond that she is not a part of. And we also see it after Leah has left the hospital and she's thinking to herself in her interior monologue, as she often does, "Why did Mum have to wait for a stranger in a strange place to talk? Why couldn't she talk with you?" And so the use of rhetorical questions here shows that Leah is really struggling to understand why her mum can't be open and honest about her feelings with her, but she can with Linan, who is a relative stranger to Joan. So the links to discovery that we have in this scene, Leah is discovering more about life in the village. Joan discovers that Linan does not have any ulterior motives, so any kind of selfish purposes, like grandfather did in the other village, and begins to trust her. Joan and Linan discover that they have many shared experiences and are able to build a close relationship because of this. Leah hears her mother open up for the first time, but is upset that she cannot share it with her. So does Linan think that Leah and Joan are family? So she hopes that they are family, but the thing that really gets Joan to trust Linan is that she says, "I hope you are family, but I'm not sure." So she's not like grandfather, where straight away she's saying, "Yep, we're family, give me some money, build me a 2-story house." She's actually kind of waiting to see what the outcome is. After Leah leaves the hospital, she wipes at the mist in her eyes. So the mist in her eyes is referring to tears in her eyes because she's crying. And the reason why she's crying is because she feels so kind of left out by her mother, where she doesn't tell her how she's feeling, but she can tell Linan. What does Joan share with Linan? What does it show about Joan and Leah's new understanding of Joan? So Joan is talking to Linan about the death of David Waters, her husband, and also about her worries for Leah and how much she feels scared that anything will happen to Leah because she's already lost her husband. And when she says that, that's kind of a big moment for Leah, because she's often had the perception that her mother is just being, crazy, when really many of the things that Joan does are motivated by her love for Leah, her daughter. So then we go to chapter 20, which is called Tong. And this is the chapter where we really learn the most about Tong, so Ke's uncle, Linan's brother. After leaving the hospital, Leah runs into Tong at the school. He takes her to the school library to look for more clues about the coin. Tong tells Leah about his fate as a teacher and the fates of others in China after Mao's Cultural Revolution. So he's talking to her about how he is forced to be a teacher for the rest of his life and how many people are in that same position of being stuck in a job where they'll never earn enough money to even feed their families, and the kind of hopelessness that gives them. He agrees that what Ke and the other students are doing is right in that they're fighting against corruption, but he does not sound hopeful that they will succeed to change anything. So we see this in the quote, "China is out there marching with them, but it is difficult to persuade a tiger to become a bullock." So this allegory or analogy compares China to a tiger, and what the students are doing is trying to turn a tiger into a bullock, which is not something that's really possible. So he's kind of saying that, yes, the students have the support of the people, but what they're trying to do is not possible, which is not a very hopeful statement. And we also have imagery and symbolism in Leah's kind of description of the school. Everything, the corrugated roof, the concrete walls, the steps, the metal railings, even the rows of glinting glass were grey. No paint, not a flicker of colour, more a prison than a school. So this description of the school, again with the symbolism of that colour grey, which we've also seen through the grey woman on the train, the party official. So this colour grey has come to represent throughout the novel a lack of freedom and hope that we see in China as a result of that corruption and restriction of the government. So links to discovery that we see in this chapter. Leah and Tong continue to search for new information about the coin, and Leah discovers more about life in China for Tong and other teachers. So again, she's discovering more and more about the political situation in China and what it's like for people to live there. What comparisons are made between village schools and schools for children of government officials? What link can be made that supports the view of Guanxi? So the schools for children of government officials are described in this chapter as having beautiful gardens and colourful classrooms and kind of state-of-the-art tools and equipment for those children. But we compare this to the school that Tong works in, which is a village school, and it's the complete opposite. And it kind of ties in with the idea that the government officials all have colour televisions, whereas everyone else just has to have black and white. And so you kind of get this image throughout the novel that the privileged, corrupt officials live life in colour, whereas everyone else in the villages has to live life in grey and black and white, which is obviously shown to be quite unfair. What is Tong's definition of democracy? So Tong defines democracy as being the ability to choose your own fate and have the freedom to kind of make a life for yourself. What does the analogy in the story of the tiger and the bullock refer to? So it refers to the students' attempts to turn China into something that it's not. Okay, so when we look at chapter 22, which is called Lone Paddy, in this chapter, Leah and Ke walk home from the school together. Ke shows her, from the cafe together, Ke shows her the paddy he and his mother worked on together after his father was taken. He tries to show Leah that building a close relationship with her mother will allow them both to heal. So the lone paddy is a really important symbol in the novel. While we were out here working, we were just us and nobody could touch us. We went out to the paddy and dug and didn't talk much about father or where he was or anything. And when we found out that father had died, well, we went out and dug until we had been friends, mates, is it, for long enough, and the paddy didn't matter anymore. So Ke and his mother have used this paddy, this field which they dug and tried to plant in, they've used that to kind of work together, forget about what's happening, and build a close relationship so that they can make it through this time of tragedy. And that's what Kurt is trying to show Leah her mother has tried to do. And he's trying to show her that being close to her mother will actually help her to recover from the death of her father. So the links to discovery that we see in this scene, Kurt opens up to Leah about his relationship with his mother after his father died. He tried to help Leah make discoveries about her own relationship with her mother. How did the Paddy help Kurt and Leenan after Kurt's father was taken? It helped them to forget about what had happened and to build a closer relationship. What does the Paddy represent? So it represents their closeness, their ability to move on and recover from painful memories and experiences. What do you think might be similar to working on the Paddy for Leah and Joan? So have a think about, for Leah and Joan, what did they work on and do together after the death of David Waters, so Joan's husband and Leah's father? What was the thing that they kind of threw themselves into to try and keep busy and focus on something positive rather than being sad about the death? So have a think about what that might have been for Leah and Joan. We'll find out later in the novel. So we go on to chapter 23, The Special Day. So in this chapter, Tong comes to tell Leah and Leenan he has made a breakthrough with the coin. So he's learnt something new. He has discovered it is much older than they originally thought. Leah goes to visit Joan and on the way stops to remember the letter from her grandfather. So before David Waters passed away, Joan received a letter from her father telling her that he was very sick, and that was the letter that contained the coin and instructed Joan to go to China and try to find their ancestral village. So that was a really significant letter for Joan. She begins to see things from her mother's perspective and to understand how she feels. She and Joan talk about their fathers and why they came to China. They are open and honest with each other and seem to be becoming closer. When Leah gets back, Leenan is breaking into her husband's box looking for the coin. Inside, they find a bamboo cylinder which contains the other half of the coin. They join the two halves of the coin and celebrate the discovery that they are truly family. So as part of Leah's reflection, one of the things she kind of says to herself using that interior monologue where she addresses herself in second person, "You have been forgetting things like that, haven't you? Full of yourself since Dad went. Joan's dragging you off to China. Joan's trying to make you part of her Chinese family. Joan's trying to bury Dad's memory." So she uses a rhetorical question to show that she's kind of grappling with her own self. And we have the repetition of Joan and the listing of all the things that she's kind of accused Joan of doing to her, when really she's been doing these things for her. So this is a moment where Leah's really reflecting on her mother and the way that she treats her mother as well. "My father was asking me, and your father was asking you. We both have come all this way to find our ancestral village for other people." So parallelism is when two parts of a sentence are structured in a very similar way. So we have that in this sentence here. My father was asking me, and your father was asking you. So those two sentences sound very similar. The only words that are different are my and me and your and you. But other than that, they're the same phrase. So that's why we call that parallelism. And what Joan is saying here is that she and Leah have both wanted to come to China for their fathers. But along the way, it's become less about their fathers and more about the two women. And so now Joan reveals what that paddy, the lone paddy that Ke and Leenan worked on together, Leah and Joan's paddy was in fact China. This trip to China and finding their ancestral village. Joan admits, yes, Leah, I wanted China to be our paddy. So she wanted to use it to keep themselves busy, to focus on something positive, and to build a closer relationship following that tragic event, the loss of Leah's father. So the paddy, again, it becomes a symbol representing their relationship and their struggles and everything they've kind of been through together. She placed the broken coin near the black metal, then nudged the coin across the wood with the nail of her finger, reducing the space between the two pieces from a lake to a canal to a gap to a seam. So symbolism of the coin in this sentence here as Leenan finds the second piece and puts them together. And we also have listing of all the things that Leah is comparing the gap to: a lake, a canal, a gap, a seam. So as the two pieces become closer and closer, they go from having a wide divide between them to finally becoming one. And this kind of represents the two sides of the family as well. So Joan and Leah and Leenan and Ke have become closer, and the gap between them has been slowly disappearing. So the links to discovery that we have in this chapter: Leah's reflections on her grandfather's letter lead her to make a discovery about her mother's feelings and what she has been through. Leah is discovering a more sympathetic view of her mother, sympathetic meaning that she's able to feel for her and understand what she has gone through. Leah and Leenan discover the other half of the coin, and after discovering the coin, as they all celebrate together, Leah discovers a feeling of happiness and family with Tong and Leenan when they discover the coin. So as they're hugging and celebrating, Leah feels that she truly belongs and that these people really are her family. How do Leah and Joan find common ground in chapter 23? So they find common ground when they realise that they've actually both been doing the same thing the whole time. They've both been doing something for their father. And this kind of helps them to realise that they are together, they are similar, and they can relate to one another because of these things they've been through together. Why is the joining of the two halves of the coin important? The reason why it's so important is because it finalises the fact that they are truly family. So when the two halves of the coin can be joined and they fit together perfectly, this proves once and for all that Leenan and Ke and Tong truly are their family and that they have found their ancestral village. But the joining of the two halves does take on a further meaning, later in the novel.